we'll do the live thing first. Like. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's good to see y'all again, and it's great to be here with a guest again. It's your first time listening to the podcast, welcome. If you're a long time listener, welcome back. If you want to support the podcast, check out our Patreon at patreon.com/the Bigmark podcast, and you can check us out on Twitter at the Bigmark podcast, and on Instagram at the Bigmark pod. But like I said, I'm glad to be back here with a guest, my boy Christian.
My man, Mark. How are you, man?
Usually behind the camera here, and I've been doing solo-ish, but good to see you again.
It's good to have you just have me here and to see you doing your thing again, man. It's been a while for sure.
I know, eh?
It's cool.
It's a little bit of a different setup in here today, but no, it's 100% great to be back, and yeah, we got the new camera, we got the new lights.
Yeah, things look good in here. It's
right?
Turning into plus we got the headies.
Yeah, we got headphones too.
Whoop whoop! We're upgrading.
Oh yeah, always.
Thanks.
Thanks, Auntie Sheila, if you're listening out there for the Long McQuaid's gift card to get these headphones.
Yes, Auntie.
We got Jack Williams here behind the camera too.
Whoop whoop! Bye, Jack Wills.
Hello.
We were thinking about trying to get everyone on the camera today, but this is going to be our new. Or this is our first shot at having a new body on this camera, and we just got Jack behind it, so here we are.
We'll bring a second cam next time.
One day, once we get the second camera in, I think it'll be easier to have a third body in.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if we would just like kind of put a chair in the corner or something. But anyway,
yeah,
here we are. We're having fun.
You just make like a nice L-shaped couch.
I know. That'd be nice.
A nice V.
Because then you could kind of just hit us from this angle a little bit.
Everything.
Yeah, exactly. Anywho, so here we are. And we were kind of thinking about when we were starting, like what would we want to talk about, and you know, I haven't heard much about your kind of film escapades.
Yeah.
So how'd those go?
Oh man. Well, first of all, it was quite a hell of a time. I'm thankful for Marcy. If you're hearing this, man, that girl's my homegirl, man. She's sick. She's kind of helped me out through a lot of this process, and still continuing to help me out through different avenues of it.
Okay.
But yeah, it was great. I shot for Mad Canada, so Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Right.
So I was they're kind of like PA for it, so I helped them set up the shoots. I kind of got lighting ready for them as well. I helped out pretty much every department, and I got into contact with the actors and stuff. So
cool.
All around, it was just eye-opening kind of like experience to soak up and also see how things are on a different level of caliber, right? Like it's different kind of doing your own thing in the background scenes and kind of being creative. Right. But it's a different one to see how like professional stuff is done, or like stuff you would see on a commercial, or stuff you would see, you know, on your like local TV show, and to see how they run things and see how they set up lights, see how they operate, which was obviously as expected, more than I thought it was. Like there's so much that goes into like a 5-second shot that you wouldn't imagine.
Sure. Like
the amount of moving and light fixtures and the amount of takes, like it's got to be like perfect. And when you got client there, I'm not going to say any names or anything because it's not my say, but if you have a client there, which we did for this one, they have an eye for it as well. They kind of have an eye for the vision that they want to make for the shoot or for the scene, and then you got the you got the client wanting a vision, then you got the actual director who also have kind of their own vision of how things are. So you can kind of bump heads a little bit because some directors are like, no, I had a vision. If I can't do it that way, it's not going to work. And then you have others like, yeah, whatever you want, we'll kind of make happen. So again, it was just being in that field, seeing different things, seeing how it all works, man. And it's opened doors for me in different areas, which I haven't jumped into yet, but everything's in the works. So it's been great, man. I'm super blessed, and it couldn't have happened at a better time. And things are only continuing to happen at better times. And you know, I'm thankful for you guys as well, because it started here for most of it and doing other things. So
unreal.
It's great, man, to have you guys also, you know, do my thing, and to have you shout me out when I'm not here. Don't worry, I did hear that and I watched it. So I appreciate the love in all aspects, man.
Always. You know what I mean? Like we wouldn't have been able to get this going if it wasn't for you guys and all that great stuff. And I mean, it's interesting the way you talk about, how like either directors and producers work, right? Because it's kind of very similar to what happens in the music industry,
Right.
that you have like your producer, which when you're making an album, your producer is more or less like the director. I mean, as a band, you have obviously all the input you can have as a band, but there's certain producers out there that potentially have a way that they do it, right? That's just how they've always done things. And whatever you come to them with, they're just trying to kind of reshape your idea to fit their own. Whereas there's some producers that are just like very open and will kind of be like, yeah, whatever you guys want,
100%.
I'll try my best to make that happen.
Right.
And that's probably the more difficult of the two, rather than being the person to be like, oh no, this is exactly the way I want it and this is how I'm going to do it, no matter who comes to me. And even in sports too, funny enough, like I find there's coaches like that too, where some coaches will just try and fit a square peg into a round hole no matter what every year.
Sure. Yeah.
Like even in high school, which I find is probably the silliest place to be rigid, because you always have new people coming in.
For sure.
Even in college too, for that matter, right? Like it's really only in the pros where you can be like, this is how I coach, and I'm going to find players that play like this. Right. Like, yeah, you can maybe get away with it a little bit more like in NCAA, where, there's a lot of schools and like, you can kind of recruit the players you want.
Right.
But at least in Canadian high school, like you're getting the most random people.
Sure.
Like maybe I know at my high school, St. Mary's in Hamilton, like a lot of girls went there specifically because we had a really good girls program. But other than that, like you just went to the school that was close to where you lived.
Sure.
Right.
There is definitely some of that. And there's also a bit of it on the other end too. Like they train kids to go to a certain university.
Sure.
Or hockey team.
Sure.
Like it's huge in London when you got like junior nights and you got junior stangs.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're playing junior stangs or junior nights, you're either going to the nights or you're playing Western.
Right. It's so true.
Yeah. So it's cool seeing that. But yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. Like there is that, I guess you did remind me of like Carleton in Ottawa kind of does that with basketball. They have like a rep program where they have like younger kids, and it's like usually coached by the assistant coach of Carleton.
Right.
So then by the time, if you're still good, by the time you're like going to university, chances are you're going to go to Carleton because you already know the program. They know who you are.
Connections for sure. Yeah.
Right. Like it's huge. Like you said, all the junior Mustang stuff. Like we had a lot of guys at Western that were like local London guys, probably because of that.
CCH in that too, right? For sure.
We did. I guess we kind of did stuff like that in Hamilton, but like I just like just didn't want to go to Mac because I wanted to leave Hamilton. Right. So there probably would have been a little bit more like that. And like I guess I kind of played on the basketball version of that in Hamilton because our head coach was an assistant coach at Mac. So and I knew the head coach of Mac from time because he's like buddies with my dad, and I used to play with his son. So it just, I think that was funny enough some of the reasons why I didn't want to go, because I already felt like I'd already experienced the feeling of what it's like to go to Mac and be an athlete there. Because we used to practice like in Bird's gym and everything.
You are there.
Right. Yeah. It felt like it anyway. And this was like a few years through high school. Like it wasn't even like just like one summer. But that's the thing, I guess, with sport too, is that, you can have those grassroots programs and you potentially will get like some benefit out of that, but some kids might burn out from it too.
Sure.
Right.
And like going back to the whole like coaching style and like director and all that stuff, I think one thing that I saw, well, thankfully we had a great producer and director and client who both wanted the same vision. It was super down to do anything. Cool. So it made everything work beautifully. And you saw the enhancement of like artistic quality that came out because of it as well, because there wasn't no discrepancy, or there wasn't no kind of like, there was a bit like questioning, which is completely normal, and like healthy conflict to make things work.
So what would be like a normal question?
It's not really like, it's more of like, oh, the grass was in the shoe, we got to redo the whole thing. And like they just spent like half an hour running through it with everybody, making sure everybody knew what's going on. And then it's like, well, we can't, like the road's only so big, we can only put the camera here, or else we're getting the glare from the sun here. So there's like little things like that, but at the end,
it's like execution. It's like, how can we actually do this?
It's like, it's pretty much problem solving. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's like, how can you make it happen? And when you have a director and or client that have the same kind of vision for everything, it just those little things get filled out with more artistic value. Like there was things that were added into the shoot that originally weren't supposed to be there, or some things that were taken out because of it. And
Sure.
I think all in all, though, that whole image and point to that is that even if there was and wasn't conflict, art penetrated through that all.
Very cool.
It didn't. It was the end goal was to get something that was going to be beautiful, and that's what happened.
Very cool. I think that's got to be the goal of everything too. And like I was saying too, it's not like those more rigid, producers and performers and directors might not necessarily get that done too.
Right.
But I feel, at least personally, I like that whole idea of allowing the art to kind of flow through like the best you can. And it's really difficult, and it's interesting. I'd like to hear, Jack, I'd like to hear your opinion, because we're talking about creating in a group, whereas you get to do a lot of your, almost 100% of your creation, would you say?
Yeah,
99%. Maybe there's some
A little bit of inspo in there.
inspo.
Yeah, there's definitely
if
a
you
lot
want
of
to count
inspiration and reference to the work.
Right, but still,
painting and
Right.
that.
but mostly solo.
Yeah, it's coming from my hand and my tools. So
Yeah.
the actual execution of it, as you're saying, like the actual roll the clip sort of aspect of a shoot, that's all on me. But,
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. What were you going to ask about it?
Just essentially what we're kind of talking about is in creating in the group atmosphere, there tends to be a producer or a director or some type of like kind of coach / like leader.
Right. Exactly.
So like, what's it like doing that without that person? Or you're that person. You're everybody. You're the coach. You're the freaking starting forward. You're everybody.
Yeah, you just start to play like different hats, and some days you show up and you're like the designer, and then the other times you're the client at the same time. So you have to like fight against the design that you had just in order to like.
Well, I guess
take
you
it
also
to a
have to
new
make
level
the
in a sense. And
like. I know you've mentioned that before, like in your commission approach. How much input does the client really have?
it's basically like for right now at least. It'll probably just continue, if not get more strict. It's like an initial conversation.
Sure.
I just ask them for like color direction if they have one already. If not, I can direct them like a size, a space where it's going to go, things like that. And then I do ask them for like, if you have any right now, what's the inspiration behind this?
Right.
Of course, with the preface of like my style will be the primary shown here.
Sure.
Trying to then, of course, match it with someone, and depending on where they're going to have it, their home, their office, whatever.
Right.
That can kind of like, I guess you could say, increase the focus on that. Like if I know that it's going in like, how do I say it? Doesn't take away like the seriousness of my intention with it, but I like if it's home decor.
Yeah.
I think it can be a bit more like loose and open.
Cool.
Whereas like if it's gonna go in somebody's front office, it's got to stick to their like role, their industry, things like that. But yeah, in regards to like how far their style or their want of the painting to come, it's pretty much like after that first conversation, I'm pretty much taking full control.
Right.
Like you'll hear from me. I'll send updates, videos, pictures, and that's your time to be like, whoa, pump the brakes. I don't like this. I don't like where it's going. I don't like that color. I don't like whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I do really emphasize like I'm going to take control with this. So yeah.
So that and that's pretty cool. Again, like in the sense where you have that control and you can kind of go like, this is just what I'm, this is what you guys liked and this is what you're paying for essentially.
There's always a risk, right? 'Cause you're going to have that risk of like, I'm going to take control. And then like I've luckily not had any like clients say like, I don't like this. Like when I get to the end of it, but I'm just waiting for it. You know what I mean? Or like once I start doing more like commercial stuff and everything as well, where it's getting a bit more, as I said, like tuned to a brand and it's got to represent that person. And if they're like a bit more clean cut, they may not want, crazy abstract. They might want like just simple, minimal, and that's it. Like don't bring color. I want simple black and white.
Cool.
But if I like don't get that from them ahead of time, I might go nuts on purple.
Right.
And then show up and they're like, what the fuck is this?
Right.
So it's like in that beginning stage, you really have to emphasize like, tell me everything that you want now because soon you're going to kind of run out of the time, or if not run out, we're going to have to, like Christian said, you're going to have to problem solve. Like you're not always going to have the perfect sun.
Sure.
Right. Or you're not always going to have the perfect vision for somebody's painting.
Sure.
But I always emphasize, like with the commissions, it's collaboration more than anything. So it's like when I give you an update, don't be afraid to say that you don't like it or you want something a bit different or refined, but also remember that like you came here too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I also think a big part that plays into it is like the coach teacher aspect, or like, sorry, the student teacher aspect of it. I know when I was first starting to get into my whole thing, I would look up to certain people, and not necessarily like a coaching way, but it made me a student for them. So I guess you could call it, but they're almost more of like a mentor-ish-esque to it. And then you kind of bounce back and forth in that when you start doing your own work and bounce it off of other people as well, or see other people.
Sure.
And they're asking kind of back and forth with that whole kind of like collaboration portion of it.
Right.
Because like you can't always be the coach. Even if you're the master of it, you can always have something to learn and always have something new to grow. So there's always needs to be that teacher coach kind of dual-esque to it.
For sure. And I think like, you know, my big experience with some of the producers I've worked with, at least one in particular, shout out Glenn Marshall, was just kind of like teaching us a lot. Like you said, like he was that teacher for sure. And then, you know, there are times where he kind of you know, it's tough where you don't, as a music producer, I can see it's tough because you don't want to just make every band sound like the same. Right? Like you do want to like make them still sound like them. Right? That's really, I guess, the goal is like you want to make the band sound like them. But when you know we're like new at it, you kind of can't help but like take a lot of like, you know, artistical, you know, perspective or like route / you know, you just like are able to move and like exert your energy a little bit differently in that sense where and we were happy for it to happen because we were just learning. But at the end of the day, you know, it started to change a lot of how we sounded, you know, and if the way we sounded wasn't great, then that's the way it's going to be. But like, and it's great to have a producer that's knowledgeable enough to change that.
Sure.
But at the same time, like I feel like throughout history, a lot of bands that have played or produced or even produced themselves have been able to like, just, this is exactly what we wanted. And this is exactly how it's going to be. And like most artists have done their best to make that happen where they have like full on artistic like control that way. Yeah.
I think that like kind of correlated to the whole like videography world too. It's hard to create something more than once, like especially with this whole Mad Shoot. They've done it. It was like their 10th year or like 15th year of doing it. So you have to keep on coming with content that's going to keep attracting the audience. And it kind of puts pressure on the company a bit. Yeah. And also who you have in, because you got to be like, hey, we've done it already, but do it again, do it better. And they're kind of like, oh, yeah, sure, got you. But then when you show up and they're like, wait, I had my own vision about it. And you're like, but yeah, I thought I was making it a vision. So then there's that aspect of it. And then if you do create like a really good one, how do you top it? Right? Like how do you keep creating something that's going to keep on being popping and keep on attracting that bang, you know what I'm saying?
I think that potentially is like every artist, every type of art,
for sure,
that's their ultimate goal. Is, you know, if we talk about music, there's a lot of bands that just have a great first album and then never do anything again,
or like a single hitter band,
or like a great movie and then they never, the director never does a good one again.
Well, it's interesting to think of like how much time you're also like going up against. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, because it's not so much like that competition thing we're kind of saying about before, but you're trying to be unique against so much other time. Whereas like another conversation sort of on the videography run of like YouTubers, for instance, I heard like people talking on a podcast recently where they're saying, how are you going to become like the next big YouTuber with how much has been done? You know what I mean? Like all the guys that just went absolutely crazy on it, did all the pranks, did all the crazy, like, you know, wild videos,
chugging alcohol and all that crazy stuff.
Everything is kind of
eating dip
arguably done.
Chugging raw chicken.
Yeah, chugging raw chicken.
It's just all Shoe Nice videos.
Right,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
and now they're chugging beer from shoes.
See, that's the thing, Shoe Nice, and then it's like if you were to ask like a 14-year-old now, it's Steve will do it.
Yeah,
Right? It's
right,
like the
100%.
new version of it, the new,
Steve-O versus Steve will do
but
it.
it's interesting to think like, how far back and in which like art form you're doing, like how, I'm looking at like a lot of art documentaries right now and being like, hey, how do I learn from all of these going like, back to the 1800s, like how they were painting. We talked about Vermeer.
Did you see The Power of Art yet? That BBC thing?
I don't think
you would dig
so.
on it big time. So
Maybe.
it's here, I got my phone over here because
Continue your thoughts.
I've been
since
used
then,
to
like,
I've been
talk
used
about
to
Vermeer
doing
now.
this now solo dolo with this one. So The Power of Art is like a BBC like documentary series. It's only one season. But it is Simon Schama.
Oh yeah,
have you ever heard
that's
of him?
all. Yeah, that's what I've been watching.
Nice,
But
no
the
way.
Power of Art, and they just go through a bunch of different.
And the guy just
artists
walks
across.
around like Florence and is
Yeah.
like, this guy used to do
Yeah.
all this stuff.
Sometimes he's a bit much, and then other times
It's
like,
dramatic,
so-
but it's
yeah,
pretty interesting.
absolutely. It's
And
BBC.
there's like dramatic recreations for everyone listening. If you haven't watched it, go check it out. There's like dramatic recreations of like the artists at the time. Like the Caravaggio one is wild because he was just like a wild man.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Yeah,
like
like
stabbing
Bruce-
people, dude,
Yeah.
like crazy stuff.
They
This,
go
'cause this
into
is
the-
like the 1500s or
they
whatever,
go into
right?
the deep, like both like
Medieval times.
artistic, artistic practice, but then also like their deep personal lives, all the information
Right,
they
like
have. of
Turner and stuff,
Yeah.
and he was just like kind of like the working man's artist, which I thought was really interesting. He was like really approached it as like a craft. So like I think I've mentioned this. It might have even been on our podcast, Jack. Like, and I've told you guys this a bunch of times when we were working together. But like the craftsman and the artist. So like the laborer works with his hands, the craftsman works with his hands and his heart and his mind, and the artist works with his hands, his mind, and his heart.
Right.
And I felt like Turner was a little bit more the craftsman, where he just saw art as it was a skill that he could do, and he did it. Wasn't so much like something like a passion.
It's pretty interesting to think like how relatable that is, given like how I started.
Right.
Because I found so much appreciation for painting after I started. Like I just randomly picked it up, and it was like, okay, I'm gonna pick this up now. It's like, imagine one day deciding like you're gonna make a birdhouse. So you go and get a saw and get wood and everything, and then you do some like pretty shitty cuts to begin with, and then over time you realize like, oh, I can lock the saw, and I can actually like put the dimensions in that I need and everything. And it's like, picking up that skill at the beginning is funny. Like going in is just, I'm just gonna be a worker on this craft, because it might work. And then for whatever reason, you, after trying enough, because I mean that's the constant thing the thing that a lot of people come to say after they've like quote unquote made it. Right. Is like, oh, you'd be like silly to think this is the first thing I did.
Sure.
Right. Like I've done so many other things. I one day decided to try this, and boom, and it works. And then,
but that's fundamentals.
I get that kind of statement a lot more now, where I'm like, oh, people are like, oh, you paint, and I'm like, yeah, a year ago, and they're like, what? Like, that doesn't make sense. Like, how'd you just randomly pick it up? I'm like, I just did.
Yeah.
Like I can see the shock on people's face sometimes when you're like, yeah, and now I'm just calling myself a painter and an artist. And
well, you are, right?
It runs.
Yeah. You are what you do.
It. Yeah, you just decide to do it and call yourself something.
Yeah. It was the same thing with the producer who did Mad. He went to McMaster for business.
Oh, cool.
And he's like, yeah, it just fell in my lap, and I've been doing it ever since.
Right.
But like he's killing it. But like it's just crazy how it doesn't seem like you don't need a path of it. It's just however it comes to you. Also, whenever you're willing to take it on is a whole nother thing. And then you find out through that work and kind of craftsmanship, that art kind of settles in.
Sure.
Like it's been there, but it kind of finds its place.
100%.
Because you have to learn, like Jack said, to play with you have to learn how to operate it first.
Well,
and then once you learn how to operate, then you can get into that flow state, because now you're not consciously thinking about how to operate it.
Right.
You're already operating it, and now you're able to just put whatever your heart and mind is into it.
Well, that brings up a really interesting thought I had where, it's fundamentals essentially, where, the most daunting thing for everyone when they're trying to learn a new task is like, oh, I'm going to have to continue to learn and always, and like, yeah, that's of course part of it. But really every artist, every person who has a skill, you're just using a form of fundamentals, right? Like it's like in sport, like anything, like you learn in basketball, you learn how to dribble and shoot and pass. every other thing you do in the game is just some variation of that, right?
Yeah.
Like it's not like you have to learn now how you learn to like do a backflip, right? Like it's like it's just
after
like
half court you're doing like double
right,
over rollovers,
or like all of a sudden once you've done this for 10 years, then we're going to show you like how to really play basketball. You know what I mean? Like even martial arts too is almost like that too, where it's like you got to start here. But like it's just all a bunch of different kicks and a bunch of different punches, like depending technique. Like I know jiu-jitsu is pretty like infinite when it comes to that kind of stuff, but even music, really essentially there's only 7 notes, and everything else is just some type of variation and putting them together in a different way that sounds cool. And like once you learned how to like kind of, but again, once you learn to like fundamentally use the paintbrush, you're good. You'll always be able to continue to refine that. And that's the thing that maybe people get confused. It's not necessarily always learning a new skill. It's just refining that skill through practice and continuing. Like you mentioned, once you build that thing for the first time, then you have a jig, or you just have that. And once you get that done, you can just keep repeating it. And maybe that's the level you stay at forever. And you just make better and better birdhouses, or you branch out, no pun intended. You branch out and you try different things and you start to make new things, and then that will just expand your skill, right? Like, and there's that quote, a jack of all trades is a master of none. And there's that new clip out there, right? That's not the full quote. It's a jack of all trades is a master of none, but it's better than the master of one. Or better than being the master of one. Right? So like, a lot of people think like, people who, try to do all kinds of different stuff, they're wasting their time and splitting their attention into being like, you know what I mean? Like you don't know enough about this one thing, but essentially through cross training is like the way I like to call it. Like, cause it happened for me in sport. Like I would have never been the football player I was if it wasn't for basketball.
Right.
That happens with everything in life. Right. And if anything, you get more attention, if that's the word, for like, oh, like I didn't know you did this certain skill, or I didn't know you had this certain skill. It's that maybe erases people's stereotypes. That's potentially more interesting to them. Maybe that's part of the like the attention it grabs, or they realize, wow, this is like a well-rounded person who hasn't only done one thing. And kind of that's what we were talking about a little bit before the podcast started, that you don't just keep staying in the same mindset and the same role and just have the same people tell you the same thing over and over again. Then there's no like real growth or whatever. Right.
And I think if people like artists specifically worry about that, it kind of puts a damper on their work, like trying to like go at it every day as if you're trying to be better, or trying to, come at it with like something new, because naturally you doing it, you'll do it anyways, in a sense, and in your own way, which is part and parcel even better. Right. Because then you can, if you do learn about it later on, you can apply it to something that you've already kind of done for yourself. Right. You kind of be like, oh yeah, I kind of try to do it this way. And then all I needed was that. Yeah. But because I was able to do it on my own, I can do it my way of it. Right. You know what I mean?
100%.
Because I've done that. Like I'm definitely guilty of trying to learn something new every day, and kind of what did I learn and what didn't I learn this day or not that day.
Right.
But in that sense, me just messing around and having fun with some stuff, I've come up with my own ways of doing it, and then applied other aspects and created something that I've never really seen before. Yeah. Or did it in a way that was just my unique version of it. And that alone does so much, because if someone wants to worry about being the best by a certain point, or keep on trying to better themselves every day, they're just going to get in a rut and just be hard on themselves. And then their artistic side is not even going to come out, because now you're too worried about operating the machine too well. Yeah. It's doing the kind of, it's just counterintuitive completely.
Right. Like, yeah, there's, I don't know if this is exactly what you're saying, but it's almost like, doesn't matter how long you're on a plateau until you want to kind of go to the next level too. Like use the best you can, like make the, like, yeah, maybe you get to a certain level of your knowledge and you're there, make the most of it. Right. Where I feel like so many people are just trying to be like, I got to get to the next level.
Yeah.
And like, then you get like distracted by just trying to do that.
Sure. Also, like, you don't have to you don't have to do it every day either. Like take a break.
Sure.
Let your brain do its thing. Go watch a show.
Yeah.
Don't want to walk. Like, don't feel like you got to be trapped in four walls and look at the same.
I think that's important.
Piece all the time, because it's not going to go anywhere. Or if it is, it's just going to it's going to be a disaster because you're in this mental turmoil the whole time.
Right.
And it's completely, again, counterintuitive again.
Yeah. I think that's really important, actually. That's a super important point where I feel like, especially as artists, or even people who are like driven, doing their own thing,
For sure. Yeah.
not having a lot of other like people that are like not having a boss or something per se, I feel like if you're not constantly, or I feel like people think this way, that if you're not constantly creating or not constantly doing what you want to do, then you're like wasting time or not, again, just not doing
falling
what
behind.
you should be doing.
For
right?
sure.
Yeah.
Which can be so stressful if you're just a content creator for itself. For
I
sure.
guess that's been the hardest thing over the past year and a half too, right? Is that, you know, you haven't been able to do a lot of stuff, so then that same feeling just continues to get compounded. Probably.
Media plays a part too.
Right.
When you're seeing so many things go on all the time, 24/7, it almost makes you feel like you're behind without even being started yet.
You're also balancing the very emotion that's making you succeed, like that urge to get better. It's hard to turn it off because you know it's what got you here,
which is healthy to have.
exactly.
Right? That's one thing to note as well. It's if you don't have it, you're not normal. Like, there's something wrong.
But we were just talking about that, like self-talk too.
Yeah,
right.
The internal
like
dialogue.
Where a lot of people that have that internal dialogue, like it does help you to a certain extent. But like, you know, I was saying to the boys, like, you know, like my self-talk is like really bad. Like when I like, especially if I make a mistake or like I think I'm making it, or I feel like I'm not working hard enough. Like I find like my self-talk is like bad, like, you know,
Same.
and I don't know how much that goes for everybody, but like, you know, I legit had coaches and like, you know, like even my pops was like pretty tough on me growing up, mostly with sports, that like, you know, I feel like I have a lot of like a deep reservoir of like
Toxicity.
You know, I'm not the only one who thinks this way.
Yeah, for sure.
Or like at least just like a vocabulary potentially of like things to say to yourself that, again, just, you know, there's that quote where it's like, careful what you say to yourself because you're always listening.
Yeah.
Right. And I know you guys were saying that you're like trying to
speak in spells, man.
Yeah.
I've been really trying to change it up, just how I speak to myself, and if I mess up too, how I approach it.
Right.
Instead of having that like competitiveness from playing sports, like, man, what are you doing? Like, wake up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's more of like, like, it's all good, bro.
Yeah.
Like, shit happens. Let's crush it next time.
Because I never really considered myself like a super competitive person, but I'm just I want to personally excel.
Correct.
Right. Like, and I think everyone obviously wants that.
Yep.
And you know, I don't know for everyone listening to, there's
definitely levels for sure.
Sure. Yeah. But, you know, hopefully everyone listening to, like, it, you know, if you feel like, you know, your self-talk is a little bit harsh, like, again, you know, try and lighten up on yourself a little bit. And, you know, it's tough though, right? Because, you know, especially once you get used to it, and if that's been the case for a long time.
Habit, right? So as soon as it happens, you're automatically kind of saying the stuff that you would in your dome. It's good. He's just like completely rewiring your whole context toward yourself. And then I think like the best way to do it is by doing it to others. And then when you can do it to others, it kind of becomes habit for yourself. I think that's the best way to practice it.
Brings up the quote that I said before we started, which was like, if you spoke to your friends the way you speak to yourself, you'd have no friends. Right. And it's like that. That one's always reminded me of like, as much as you need to like work on the self-love, because that's all where that negative talk comes from, I think, is like that poor idea of self that we sometimes hold for whatever reason it's come about. But then also like self-forgiveness too, where it's like, if you knew for the last week you've been getting on yourself heavy, it's like, okay, cool, like let me be easy on myself now. Right. Let me forgive my like troubling week, let's say, or like whatever I said just now.
Yeah, and I think it's very important to also listen to yourself too. Like I, for some reason, had a weird thought about food basics about 2 weeks back, and it kept popping up in my head. I'm like, so finally I sat down, and I'm like, hey, why am I thinking about this? And it took me not even five seconds to be like, you were a bit more loving that 2 weeks ago. And it was kind of like a, for me, it was almost like it was sitting there because my own self knew the course of action I was taking just by getting caught up in the like real life, being busy and all that. Yeah. So my internal dialogue was different.
Right.
So it was bothering me. So when I kept thinking about food basics, and it was because that in that time era, my internal dialogue was better. So it was almost like a reminder. It was like, it was bothering me, but instead of it being a bother, it was actually just trying to tell me, hey, just think about this for a second. And what came out of it was be a bit more loving to yourself. Like, you've been busy, but don't forget love.
Sure. Yeah. And I think it's an egotistical thought to think, like, I know I have this thought, is that, like, with that self-care kind of thing, is that, oh, you're being like selfish
Sure.
essentially.
But this is the trouble, is like people think selfish is bad.
It's not.
Right.
And sometimes it's not.
It's contextual.
It's like vital, I think. Like, if you weren't selfish, like, you wouldn't be doing half the things you already do. You've just, you turn a blind eye to a majority of things you do every day that you could be considered selfish, but it's like, how deep are we going to go? Like,
well, that's that egotistical
people get heavy
thought
on themselves about that selfish feeling, and it's like,
I've been guilty of that.
You're also taking care of yourself. Like, absolutely. There's like narratives that dig that into you for sure.
And that's that weird effect of the ego where it's like, you don't want other people to think you're selfish.
Exactly.
And
because
it's
who
like,
wants to be that guy?
Right.
Yeah.
No one wants. No one
wants to be that guy.
No one wants to be like that person selfish, because I mean that's the way we came up as people too, right? Because the selfish person, took too much, or like, and then that was taking away from the rest of the tribe, or like the rest of the people. So like,
it's like a stigma.
Being selfish is really bad. However, the right amount of selfish has allowed a lot of people to become like quote unquote successful.
Yeah.
Right. Like anyone who is quote unquote successful, no matter what they're doing, has a level of selfishness. Maybe they're like a great person, and maybe they're a horrible person, and they're very selfish, but they were rewarded for that in that certain context.
They could be a real bad person, but their business runs well and pays back to others well. So it kind of correlates for them.
It's like Wall Street, where Gordon Gekko says greed is good. Greed is good in that particular sense, right? In that era of Wall Street, greed is good, if not even today. But obviously in other places it's not, right? So that's the thing, is that, and maybe that's also part of what our culture is like today, that it is a little bit selfish, and everyone wants, and I've said it before, everyone wants more individual, their own thing. This is mine. This is my custom thing. No one else has this.
Right.
I'm the only one like this. Even my identity is customized, that I'm the only person like this.
Right.
Which is great, and it's satisfying a certain part of yourself and in your ego too, I guess. But it's satisfying a part of yourself. But when it comes to what humans do great, and when we can do great things and move mountains and do big time, carry out big ideas, it's when we work together, and or even working with other people in some format. Once we come together like that and we're so individualized, we won't have anything to actually like find any common ground with, and it'll be harder and harder to work together with people and to do that and to move mountains and stuff too, right? So as much as it's great to celebrate our differences and to celebrate, the best of the best, we also need to say, hey, what is stuff that we're all like? Because we are all one, like we've said a million times here. If we are all one, let's start to talk more about that, right? Where it is just a thing of and I think it's just a byproduct of the last 100 years or so, that we just enjoy seeing, like, the one and only this and the one and only that. But I think, again, hopefully we can start to move in a direction where that stuff is still celebrated, but we need to look at like what we all have in common too, a little bit more. And I think that's what art speaks to too,
for sure,
is like a commonality, right?
Yeah. I think no one really talks about too, like the selfless person who does it for others as well, like, and personally, and from experience, the individuals kind of got to have their shit together before they can start helping others out.
Right.
Yeah. It was like Peterson's thing, right?
Right.
And,
exactly.
Not everybody agrees, but it's like, you want to like change the world, you can't change you can't even take care of yourself.
Exactly. You can't even make your bed, and you want to help.
And it's like, those are serious lines. And sorry to kind of steal it from you for that.
No, you're doing your thing, man. It's completely that.
And I think a lot of people who don't have themselves together are the first people who try to step into certain roles where they're trying to help others, whether it's in psychotherapy roles or, certain, certain aspects of like social work or like caring for communities and stuff. They want to help others because they feel like that's a route to healing themselves. Mm-hmm. But in the process, they might also kind of injure other people too.
Yeah, they're kind of spreading their own worry as well.
Because like we said, hurt people.
Yeah.
But healed people can heal people too. So there's like the opposite of that too, right? Where if you do figure yourself out, you can then go on and really, really actually help people. Mm-hmm. But if there's part of you, or even whether it's a major or minor part of you, that part really needs to be dealt with before you start like, seriously doling out information or like trying to help people in their lives too, right? So, however, like I said, and my stepmom's mentioned this too, she's been a social worker for a long time, and she says a lot of people that kind of tend to have issues with their own self are just gravitate to like mental health work, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, I was really interested in sports medicine because I've been injured a bunch of times, right? Like through sports. So like I kind of know the whole process, and, maybe I even had some ideas of potentially how to make it a little bit better, whatever. Right. But, that was a big part of it, is that you actually do experience that one side of it. So then you're interested in like the actual other side of it too. Yeah. So, it's like movies, people like movies as kids, and they want to start direct. Like, it doesn't have to be like traumatic, but you know what I mean?
No, I think context definitely matters when it comes to that kind of thing, because you need to be nowadays. And I think personally, since I started being more selfish toward myself, I've realized ways that I haven't been and I should have been for my own health wise or whatever it may be, right? In different avenues and different like respects. So it's crazy once you start to do that, and you can kind of set up your own boundaries. But I can tell you right now, for me to do that, and I go and hang out with some friends afterward, or I go ghost for like a week and a bit, and I come back. The person who I am is a person who's going to be able to give you my all, because I've been able to have time to myself.
Right. That's huge. And I think in a time like, and I was kind of mentioning this in the last podcast too, I think in a time like now, where all of a sudden we're now all allowed to do stuff, and social gatherings are a little bit more accepted, it's almost like there's an obligation now to get back together. And now that just adds a new layer on things too, right? Where it's like, we haven't done this in a while.
We should.
Right? And now all of a sudden we have to get back to it, and it's like, oh my God. And you don't really have an excuse either, because like everyone, not that everyone would be, but everyone could easily say, but we haven't done anything for like 2 years. So what's the issue now? Right. The issue is I haven't done anything in 2 years. Right. So it's just like, it's a little bit daunting, but again, it's like, it's probably just like anything. And obviously this is like kind of a major third world or first world problem, but it's serious in the fact that, this is something that actually will help most people's mental health. I think at the end of the day, is that we've all been isolated, and getting back together will actually make us feel better. Yeah. It's just new and it's different. So it's best just to like go for it, jump in with 2 feet. Like I mentioned, my big thing coming back was like going to a bachelor party, and it was like, oh man, I haven't even seen a bunch of these guys in a while. Some of them I don't know them that well. And I haven't even really been around anyone else for like 2 years. So like, all right, let's get this done. And it was great. And I had a fun time. And at no point ever was I like, oh, like this is weird. But again, even like running into old friends I've seen in a while, it's kind of things like where it's like, oh man, like how do we do this again? Right? Because especially people that you had seen like on a regular basis too, you get into the groove. Right. And then you're not always asking like what they're doing, because you just know. So it's just these weird little aspects of society that I think are going to hopefully slowly start to come back a little bit more. And then, it won't be so weird that much. And this is coming from someone who considers themselves extroverted. I don't know what people who are like seriously introverted are feeling. Sure. They might be feeling that even more. Right. Where they're like, I was like in heaven for the past year and a half, and now all of a sudden I have to do this shit, like really bad news. Yeah. So, if again, someone who considers themselves extroverted is feeling that, I couldn't imagine, again, being on the opposite side of things. So
yeah, which I think it's also like a part of people being kind of, like you said, locked in for so long that they've had a little bit of time for themselves. So they kind of want to express their newfound or their through isolation self and come out and kind of experiment with that and dabble with the new personality or dabble with the new thing that they picked up over the thing and talk about, there's so much excitement as well that comes with that. 100%.
Why not treat 100%. it like a brand new slate, right? Like you're going to a new school.
Sure.
I think it'll be interesting to see how much like of that what would you call it? Just like the same old shit that people talk about that you would do in passing almost. Like, oh, how are you? Oh, I'm fine. Right. Whatever. Same old thing, like with that person at work or whatever. I think it might introduce like the chance that people are like, yo, fuck the small talk. That's what I was looking for. Small talk. Right. It's like, fuck the small talk. Like, let's just actually discuss what we're thinking of. Yeah. Like that we've been talking about for 2 years to ourselves, but then also like going forward, like, yeah, how are you feeling? Oh, well, actually, like today's heavy, or today's a great day. Yeah. But I did this yesterday. Like actually open up more. It's like, again, as Christian was kind of touching on, it's like an opportunity almost where it's like, it's not going to feel normal because it hasn't been normal. Right. But that's like, we never wanted to really get back to a normal, did we? Because it was like, everybody's complaining then. Yeah. So now, for sure, it's like, it depends on how we look at it, but opportunity wise, I think is the best way for us.
It was definitely a way to rattle the shell for everyone.
Well, if anything, now we have all this, everyone really on earth essentially has this one thing that we've all been through. Yep. So we should now start looking at it like, right? Exactly. Like it's this one commonality.
National problem.
Hadn't happened for a long time. Right. Where like the entire world stopped on something.
You know what? It's like, interesting with that too,
argue though. Like World War I, World War II till then. And
even 9/11 was pretty hot.
9/11 was pretty hot, but worldwide
for North America,
like the worldwide influence was like security,
like countries.
That definitely like
that changed for sure.
But like the way people traveled was never the same after 9/11.
The scare
so
too.
There was that.
There was so much scare. Like the public, I've never seen public go from so whoop-de-whoop to like hide under a rock or jump out of the way of people on the sidewalk. So scared. Like completely.
And I would almost go so far to say like it's higher with COVID, like that impact.
Oh, I think sure. Like that's part of it.
People want to do more things, but they're more scared to do it now. Right. Or they're just like, fuck it, I'm writing off social interaction.
Plus, you're hearing these things about the shots and stuff too, so people want to go out, and then they're like, what do I do? I want to go out. Yeah. But like I need all this, or maybe I don't really want to get it, but I have to get it.
You need to get 2 shots. Masks are mandatory again, and also you can get COVID even if you have the vaccine. You know, I don't even know what's being said.
It's like almost like a new reality
by the week.
Like you said, it's like there's new protocol to the game. Right. It's a different it's a different game. You're not playing, whatever you did. You're not playing Atari anymore. You're playing this new version of this game that you got to now adapt, learn how to socialize, as well as have respect for possibility that someone else might be scared of this newfound pandemic. Like so many things that come across the dome. Oh yeah. That you would never have thought pre-COVID-19.
Yeah, for sure.
100%. I think, unfortunately, with those other things, with the world wars, even with 9/11 in North America, is that the big difference with COVID is that it pushed people away. At the end of the day, it pushed people away from each other. If you look at World War II and look at London specifically, people were literally like huddled together in the undergrounds. Some not as much as they portray, but some people were like literally like in like subway stations, or like living in big homes or in like bomb shelters and stuff all together. And it brought people together. And in fact, I was reading this book, I think it was In the Darkest Hour, which is like kind of like what the movie is based on too. I think that's what it was called. It was more or less about Churchill, like in like the heaviest duty times of World War II. And they were really, really concerned. The British government was very concerned about Germany coming to bomb London because they knew that was on the table and they knew that was coming because they had fucked up Berlin, I think, first. Or anyway, it was on the table. And they were really concerned about like the English people, or like people in London at least, like flipping out and being like, like they're bombing us and just like running around with like screaming and freaking out and like looting and doing all wild shit. Right. Because they had no idea what was going to happen. Number one, this had never happened in the history of war up until that point, where like a major city was gonna get fucking tuned up, and the bombs came, and like the Londoners were like came together hard and like showed this like crazy resolve, and like if anything, there was like stories of like women getting like involved in bombings and like surviving, and they're like and they were like stoked. They're like, oh, I was bombed, like finally. Like
came a social status.
Cool.
Right? It was almost like
bond.
You know, it was like, oh, finally I've been bombed, kind of thing. Like I don't have to keep waiting for it to happen.
Think about COVID. Like that arguably became a thing. Like I would say in the States, where it was like, did you get COVID yet? It wasn't even like a like, oh, I hope I don't get it. It was just like, okay, we're all gonna get it. Did you get it yet?
Yeah.
Like I got it. I even got it twice.
I passed it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I fought it off.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sure.
But
What's like any other disease?
Point of like those events actually bringing people together, and
yeah,
I would, you know, you could all probably say the same thing for 9/11.
9/11 was a huge one.
Like
yes and no.
I feel like
it made us come together, but also create a big wall between two different things.
It depends who you're talking.
Yeah.
There's positive consequence and negative
Something
consequence.
like that, yeah.
And when I specifically mention that, I mean like literally like within the first week or two of it happening.
Sure.
Yes.
The subsequent weeks started turning to war,
politics stuff,
and started to get like actually hateful, and the
Politics.
security, and
the
it
event
actually
got
was bad.
used maliciously afterwards.
That's just it.
Whereas like the actual event and aftermath of the event was like, oh, we're people. Like we actually matter. We just saw people fucking.
Yeah, Tim Dillon
course,
talks about
everything
like
that
people were
happened
like hugging each other in Times Square and stuff. Like it was like New York City, especially up until that point, a city that was like pretty tough.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it was like, and honestly, like we're in Hamilton here, we're only about 8 hours from New York City. I swear, and I was like in grade 5. I swear you felt like some type of radiating energy.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if it was love. I don't know if it was just collective like hurt and pain, or at least collective, like, because essentially, yeah, everyone was really sad in the city, but what it actually was, and this is like obviously from an outside perspective, but like from what I saw in the news and stories from New York City, is that it just became like, this isn't going to break us. Almost like I'm assuming what happened in London, where it was like, you might be able to bomb our city and destroy buildings and kill a bunch of people, but that's not going to break who we are as New Yorkers, as Americans, as people, right?
Well, that's the hope right now, is that like, as people, we don't get completely fucked. Because I think it might even like break those borders down. Because it's like, oh, right, it's not the fact that like, you're an American, I'm a Canadian, I'm this, I'm that.
Sure.
It's like we were all affected by this, no matter who you were. Hopefully that's on people's minds. Yeah. But also like, I don't know.
I really hope it does bring people together more than not. Cause like,
it's just hard to say that in this situation where it's like, this isn't going to break us. It's like, it's pretty close to breaking us.
Yeah, like we're still walking on thin ice right now.
We're trying our best.
Yeah.
Hopefully maybe in like, once we're like really out of it, hopefully if that comes sooner than later, and we're like really clear sailing, maybe that sense will start to come back, and it'll be like, woo.
I saw a video either yesterday or this morning, and it was like, because London, like England's just opened up everything now, and it was like people just like singing in the streets and shit. Like,
oh, cool.
Oh yeah, man.
And this is after like the Euro depression, after losing in penalties as well. So it's like England was dull for a bit.
Man, England was really confident that they were going to win that too, right?
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Shout out Italy though.
I'm not there, and I thought
Italy.
it was coming home, and then
Oh man,
the worst. The worst.
How many do they have? 2?
What's that?
2 World Cups?
No, I think it's just one.
Just the one, eh?
Yeah, I think it's 66 or something like that.
Madre. Oh my god.
But this was like the first final in 55 years.
Imagine.
And home turf too, right?
Yeah. And like again, England had like sold it to themselves.
Yeah, I saw like so many pics and shit, and like vids of
the
like
racist crap.
Planes flying and stuff.
Well, everything up to it was great. Everything following it was just a fucking embarrassment. Like if we already lost, like embarrassing enough, like
take the loss.
In sports, right? In sports, like, oh, that sucks, we lost, but it's fucking sports. Like, let's get over it.
Sure.
But fucking the aftermath, all the racist stuff, like.
So tell me about that.
Man. Well, because out of the 5 that took the penalties, 3 of them were black players, and they missed. And I mean, the English are like, think about it, it's like rooted in a lot of racism, and there's
Colonial
still a bunch of those fucking chavs just kicking about. It is, it's unfortunate because like that's not the people, like that's not the actual. It bugs me because I think media makes so much more out of it than it is. I mean, even like the English media are fucking pricks. Like Sterling, for instance, Raheem Sterling on the England team, like he gets a lot of hate for all sorts. Like he's to the degree where like you can watch his like movement on the field and off the field and everything, where he's like, oh, I don't want to get like anything, I don't want to step out of line, and it's sad. But luckily, you know, the players came out and they said like, basically fuck yourself, like
no doubt,
you know, I've made this country proud, and they have. They're phenomenal. They are like the Lions, you know what I mean? And but it was on another side note, it was embarrassing as fuck to be English a few days after that.
It's tough. I mean, like even in Canada, like when Vancouver lost the Stanley Cup, do you remember this? This is like 2010, I think.
Yeah,
there was those riots.
The riots.
Yeah.
Like that's so it's so sad to see in Montreal, even in Montreal, like all through these Stanley Cups, like whether they won or lost, there was something going on in Montreal too. Like I mean, like maybe this year's a different thing because people are just like wanting to get out and do shit. But anytime you're like destroying property or like rioting because your team lost a sporting event, again, that's the interesting thing. We even were talking about this a little bit before too, where it's like, you know, sports is cool, but you really have to like suspend a lot of disbelief, and you have to like kind of enter into this world of sport. And like once you enter into this world of sport, reality is different. Like it is a different reality where you're praising things that are very different. Age is different.
You say things
like certain
that you just don't say.
Certain sport, you'd be like, look how old this guy is. He's like 32.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like shit like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, look at how well he's doing in the
why
prime
should
of his
that matter?
career.
He's on his way
33.
out.
Right. They were just talking about LeBron, how he's 36.
But it kind of is older in sport. Like, it is true. Like, but within the realm of sport. Only there, right? So, again, it's all these things where it's, like, literally this different reality where you're, like, you know, certain drugs are illegal now, you know, like, let alone even within the specific sport, you have these different rules that everyone has agreed to follow these rules. You've had this, like, especially at the elite level, it's not like you sit at the beginning of the game and go like, all right, this is basketball. You have to put the ball in the hoop. Like, everyone has known this, and it's so part of them that once you step on the court, technically you've made this unspoken agreement with your opponent that you're going to follow the rules. And if you don't follow the rules, there's refs to show. And if you are like a cheater, you'll probably be like, you know, taken care of through the social aspect of sport, or like whatever, right?
Yeah, you bring up an interesting idea of like how that coming out of COVID, like how that social like world, let's say, is going to, like, how are people going to re-enter like they would re-enter sports? You know what I mean?
It is almost,
How do you, like, you're relearning how to play?
Yeah, it's what
like
it is.
Yeah,
it's a whole new reality, man.
Some are going to be like absolutely just filth and pro at it, and then
whatever Russia was doing, Miami really did switch into that new parallel. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah, when with CERN with the Hadron Collider. In 2012. Man, but that's the thing with life, is that at least with sport there are rules, and there's like a finite number of rules. In life there are essentially no rules.
There's laws,
but like, there's no like real moral rules,
right?
Like real ones. I mean, there's religion, but not everyone is religious. And like, other than like, don't kill anyone and don't steal things,
right?
And like shit like that, which are worked into laws and stuff. Like,
right?
They
don't like teach us about trust and honesty and love and
values, and all types of stuff. And everyone has a different one, no matter what. And it's like, we're all out there trying to navigate this world, running into people who have a completely different value set than us.
Right.
And we're trying to think the way we think, knowing, because we learned the theory of mind when we're like, whatever, a month and a half or a year and a half old or whatever, that like what I'm thinking isn't what exactly you're thinking, but it's so hard for me to find out what you're thinking. Because, and it kind of gets back to what I say about the ego, is that you might not necessarily be able to put it into words what you're trying to say, and I might not be able to understand what you're trying to say for whatever reason. And that's just how we all have to navigate life. So that's why you have to be adaptable. That's why you have to be, you know, able to be a chameleon or be like water, whatever metaphor you want to use in situations, because the more rigid you are, the harder it's going to be.
Sure.
For sure. Right.
100%.
Like, because you're going to be seeing so many variables from others, there's no point of saying like, this is exactly who I am and this is how I'm going to be in every situation, even though that's valued, right? Oh, good old Mark, like he's always the same, but like no one's really the same, right? You always have to be different, right? And I had a buddy once kind of be like, he didn't say this in so many words, but it seemed like he was kind of saying like, yo man, you kind of seem fake in certain situations. And I think it was just because I was different than what I was with him usually.
Sure.
Right? And it's like, he couldn't really understand that. And he always kind of had like he was always a really shy guy. So I think that was like part of his misunderstanding with the social, with being social, is that it's not fake. Like that's who I am. I am multifaceted, layered, whatever way you want to put it. And of course I'm going to play up those aspects for a certain person because that's what they like. That's what they're going to be relatable. And that's what makes conversation easier. And that's what makes any part of life easier.
That's conversation.
Is being able to identify that common ground.
You kind of get on their vibe
and
or
then
what
play
they're
it up.
talking about. Right.
And then, maybe, of course, it's not like everything you're about.
Yep.
But like in that moment, why not? Because I am you and you are me and we're all one. What's the difference? Right? And it gets back to that master of jack of all trades kind of thing. And any time where it's like you're in a new social situation, and that's probably the thing that I'm talking about feeling out of practice of when I'm talking about like getting back into the swing of things. I'm feeling out of practice of, you know, identifying the situation and then adjusting.
Diving. Yeah.
Just because it's been the same fucking situation over and over, sitting in here, chilling, watching TV.
Yeah.
It's not not much like
the world
give
is
and
just
take
at your call for like 2 years. And now you're like, okay,
yeah, I
have to go in and just be ready for for anything.
And that's, I think, what people really do crave, right? Is, you know, as much as people strive to keep the things in their life relatively the same, I think change is the most important thing in life, is being challenged in that way and having not necessarily having control of exactly what's going to happen to you every day is actually the best thing for us, right?
Growth.
And that's one of the things in sport that you do get, because each game can be different. It can be a whole new scenario. You're always constantly challenged with something new. And there's certain careers and stuff that are like that as well.
Yeah,
but a lot of careers
you can say the same for art.
And that's what I think. Big thing with art is that it's never ending.
Right. You
can always find, if you are open and if you understand that you're a channel for something that's bigger, it's never ending. It is an unlimited reservoir, but the more you bring your own ego into things and try and control, then it becomes difficult to continue to top yourself, like we said before, because we always want to do better. But if you keep saying whatever it is, I'm not going to be able to do better than myself, is an egotistical thought, like in itself, where you're thinking, oh, my stuff is so good, how could I ever do any better? Or this guy's stuff is so much better than mine, I'm never going to do it any better than his. Both things are stifling, right?
It's an interesting, you just made me think of an interesting thought of like, could you take that openness to art to your openness of like social interaction, where, like that's the trouble, right? Because we have to hold up the egos when we go out and interact with strangers or even the people that we know close or whatever.
Sure.
Versus like, if you can eventually start to distance yourself a bit from that ego, knowing that you're still maintaining like an identity and you are a person, of course, maintain that, but just not being so fixed on your idea of it or what you think other people think about it.
Right.
The same way that like eventually, hopefully with art, whatever your version of it is like you're eventually get to the point where you just create and you're not so worried about the feedback, good or bad.
Sure.
You're just there releasing. And that's the same thing as like if you thought about your creation as your presence or your involvement in a conversation. It's like, I'm just going to show up, be this being, and just accept anything that shows up, and not be too strict around it. But
right. And that's tough. The thing. I think
tough to do.
What's interesting is that there's certain aspects of art where you get that freedom, which is amazing. And I think that people who are looking for that expression seek out that kind of thing, whether it's like poetry or sculpture or visual art and stuff like that, where, you know, there's no real rules and no one, you're going to do your own thing and you really get that pure creation expression. Whereas I think in certain aspects of film or music where you're trying to you're part of like a zeitgeist or like or a genre or like popular culture or niche or whatever, then it's an interesting balance, because you almost need a little bit of the ego to be like, I don't know if anyone's going to like that. But it has to be like a healthy aspect of it. Sure. Like you do, like, it's happened with the band a lot of times where it's like, yeah, that sounds good, but are people gonna like it? And like, it's hard to really be free in that sense, and hopefully you can create and be like, I like this and I don't care if anyone else likes it. But there is a certain, or like stand-up comedy, like if you're not funny, it's not funny, right? Like there has to be, okay, I'm listening to other people, I'm taking a little bit of their influence or their advice, and then I'm gonna bring it back into the situation. So it's interesting with those kind of more popular aspects, like pop culture, whatever, popular music, whatever aspects of art, or even like monetized stuff too, right? Where people are paying for it too. So. Interesting. That is just like what I was thinking when you were saying that.
Julian and I were talking about this the other day, and he brought up about Matt. I think it's Matt Davelli or Matt Avelli. Okay. He's like a YouTuber and does like minimalist stuff and just overall like self-scheduling and stuff like that.
Cool.
And he had like a video describing how he does his creative process to kind of like counteract that or like work with that. Okay. Which is like the one for me, one for you method, he calls it. Which is like in his YouTube videos, that's how he does it. He's like, he makes one for, the trending page, the masses that he knows is going to work into those, like the people need to have this. And then he makes one, which is like to him, which is like, one day he's doing what is the stock market. And then the next day he's doing like my favorite crypto, let's say. And the second this crypto video is his, but he knows that like personal finance is running through the algorithm right now or whatever. So yeah, it's interesting being able to like, pick out that like how much do I do it for me, my creative self, totally just my creation, and then like how do I match this to the masses and the people and what'll sell.
Because if you do want it to be your livelihood, like if it is paying the bills, you do want people to like it. So again, that's just that interesting striking that balance and understanding that. And that's I think where I'm also coming from when I say like we do need the ego, like kind of like in our life, right? Absolutely. Where I think there's a lot of people out there that, stray away from egotistical things and say that it's so bad and stuff. But, we've mentioned it a lot before, where I think it's a guide and it can be, it can help. And, if you do dabble in psychedelics, you can have moments without it, which is cool. So, for sure. But I think the people who either A, say that they don't have an ego, or B, are striving to completely dissolve it or rid themselves of their own, I think they're in a different category of things. Like, you're not going to be able to have like a day job if you don't have an ego, right? So be a guru, be able to do
be a monk, do your thing, our normal run of things. Literally. Like, again, that's the thing. If you want to be the monk, by all means. Right. But if you want to have a home and interact with friends and family and like probably like maintain control of yourself, because eventually that whole, again, the complete rid of the ego, I think we've all been close enough to know like it's not that great. Like eventually you're like, I'm done with this now. Send me back. Like
it's like constant change. Like your ego's always molding to something new, and you're always trying to It's always trying to do its own thing, and you're trying to balance it as well. It's just
and
like,
you could get nabbed, man.
Sure.
By like the mental institutions.
Yeah.
Like, straight up. Like,
Try getting out of those. Like tough.
Like straight up.
Yeah.
That if and I kind of saw it with a close friend of mine where it's like, you know, I think, you know, in that situation, my buddy got into it for the right reasons, but then potentially fell into that same trap of like the ego's no good, and just kept going down that road further and further, and then, you know, found himself in a really tough place. And, you know, whether or not he was going to end up like that, you know, with or without the things he was getting into and the way he was thinking, you know, he wound up in a, like, because his thoughts were so incongruent with reality, police were involved, mental institutions were involved, and I think that's where it becomes tough. And I remember talking to him briefly after one of his first big episodes, and without going into the story too much, like, a police officer at one point was like, "What's your name?" And he's like, because he didn't have any ID on him at the time, and he was like, what's in a name? Like, you know, it doesn't matter what my name is, I'm always going to be me. But it's like, man, it's a police officer asking you, like, you got to be like, all right, like, you know, all spiritualism aside, this is who I am, and blah blah blah. And maybe he could have got himself out of a sticky situation, but because he was fully committed, which is a thought that we've even talked about, like, what is that? And like Shakespeare talks about it, like, a rose by any other name is still a rose, right? So what is that? And he's speaking to like the essentialism of the self, or the essentialism of an object. That, and I think like Descartes was even talking about this stuff, right? Where it's like, what is like a candle? The candle's a candle when you see a candle, but when you burn it, it's a puddle of wax. You still call it a candle, but it's a fucking puddle. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's this philosophical thing. Like, it's deep and it's actually a thought, but you got to know in context at that point. No one's going to know, like, those, like, I think I said to him, like, they're not going to understand what you're saying there in that point. And then this fucking other guy that was in, like, his stepdad, kind of, if you will, was like, no one would ever understand that. And that's what I mean about, like, there's people that are never going to understand what you're saying.
That just shows the spectrum of how far it can go. Like,
precisely,
they'll never understand that. And then you're sitting there going, like, I understand what you're trying to get at. It's just a bit too far right now.
Not the right time.
It's like,
can't be saying it to a cop when you're trying to ask you what's up.
You're trying to eat soup with a fork right now, bro. It doesn't work. It's like, you need a spoon. And that's the thing. Like, the ego is a tool, and if we can figure out how to use it the right, like you said, like, he might have been able to just, hey, my name's Mark or whatever, I'm off my way, and then you're good to go. Right, exactly. And then it's like that tool. But if you don't.
It's like knowing that you know, there's a hand of cards that you got to play, which are the games of the rules of the society. But you can also just kind of, whenever you want, just look behind the hand of cards and see what you want to see for it. But know when times like that happen, you should probably play.
Totally. That and that it is a game, and that it is a ride, and you've chosen to get on it. Right. And you can also get off at any time. Like we've always said with Bill Hicks, right? That's what he says, is that you choose to get on the ride, and there's ups and downs, and there's all kinds of thrills and chills, but it is a ride, and we've chosen to get on this ride. However, whatever that means, whatever that because I think the we who had chosen to get on the ride is like the cosmic we, the cosmic I, you know, the collective consciousness, where it's like we have chosen to enter this reality, however that is, whether it's simulation, whether it's whatever, we're a part of this thing by choice. And I think we've become so part of reality that we forget that a lot of it is our own doing. And, you know, a lot of situations people get themselves into that they're all, it's your own doing. We've all got here because of our choices and the things that we've done. And I think that people really forget that. And I think it's good to take those steps out of reality, whether it's through meditation or psychedelics or whatever, where you can go, okay, this isn't everything. You know, there's so much more to these little petty things or these big petty things, but they're just things that are part of this reality that is relatively fleeting and relatively like ethereal. And whatever our self is, like, may or may not continue on, but if it does, there's so much more to existence and like what that's all about too, right? So it's super interesting how we forget. We always talk about that feeling too, about like going back to psychedelics, that it's like a reminder of like, oh, like this is what, it should be like this kind of thing, but it shouldn't be like this all the time. Right. Because again, even like you said, there's too much of a good thing sometimes, or like you need that grounding feeling too. Because again, we are like third dimensional bodies. Like we're not like, spiritual beings yet, or whatever.
We're just germs on
this
a hard
part
rock.
Of the, exactly. We're like
we're just bacteria on a rock.
Yeah, right.
That's what we are.
Exactly. So whatever lessons we need to learn by being that, or whatever we were before this, if that's like the chain of things, like maybe it's a reincarnation joint where we've been like going through like every phylum of existence and like just like experiencing it, or again, like we actually have the ability of experiencing every like form of life on this planet at once, but we just see each other as individuals for whatever reason at this point.
It's like a focus.
Yeah, perspective, all that kind of stuff. Because like I remember even like one time doing mushrooms like in the woods, like I felt like connected with like the animals too. It wasn't just like other humans. So it's super, right? Like it's super interesting with consciousness the way that works. Like how much effort should we put into feeling that way, right? Like how much time should we put into being like we're all one?
Balance.
Yeah. Balance, and yet like what is the vast proportion of people who have never even thought that, right? That have never, and hopefully there's someone listening to this and hopefully hearing this for the first time, that we're a part of something that's bigger. We're a part of something that I am you and you are me, just as much as we're all each other. And art and music and literature and everything has been telling us this over and over. Religion, it's all been telling us this over and over. In Christianity, Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is within you, that all this is within us, and the line between good and evil runs through the heart of every man, and all that stuff is all in us, and we're just really apt to project it outwards. And I think as much time as we've had in isolation, we didn't really get enough of a chance to do that inward look and really go, okay, what's going on inside? And maybe people did, and it scared the shit out of them. And if they didn't, they were just too concerned about getting sick and like all the pandy-wandy stuff. So I get it, but it's like, I think everyone can start from within. Like we mentioned before, you gotta fill your own cup before you fill others, because you can't pour from an empty cup, kind of thing, right? So again, hopefully if anyone's listening to this and they never heard that sentiment or anything, go out there, listen to all your favorite songs again, read your favorite books again, and think about it like that, and eat 5 grams of mushrooms and dried mushrooms in silent darkness. No, with a professional therapist. And in a guided scenario.
Do it in a hospital.
But seek everything out, and I think that's a perfect way to end this. It's a
perfect conversation.
Is that, I think you got to expand the mind and keep going and do it safely, but understand that we are all one, and that no matter what you do, you're just doing it to yourself. If there's someone out there that's bugging you, and if they're bugging you that much, just know that something happened on their end, and whatever that was, it happened to you too. So take it with them, sympathize, empathize, and I think we'll all get better.
Return to the breath.
That's it, boys. All right, great talking with you. Thanks for listening, everybody. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that bell and get the notifications for when we drop videos. Like it, share it. All I'm asking for you is just tell one friend, and then ask them to tell one friend, and that's all. And then we'll just keep growing, and we'll let the world know what's up.
Yeah, seriously, if any part of this rang your bell or anything opened your eyes, it's telling something. So spread it. Help us spread it.
Where can everyone find you guys?
Instagram, my name, Christian Aubin, and by Jack Williams, obviously.
Yep. Beautiful. Right. Check them out. Follow them. Like their stuff. Spread the word. Check us out on Twitter at the Bigmark Pod. on Instagram at the Bigmark Podcast, and support the podcast on Patreon. You know, there's a bunch of different tiers there to show your love. And the patreon.com/the Bigmark Pod. All right, everyone. Love ya. See you next time. Peace.